For my presentation, I decided to focus on the refugee crisis in Turkey and how the European Union specifically has been affected by it, and also what they are doing in order to aid in this situation. In order to fully understand the crisis, it's important to understand the origins of the refugees and the situation that they have been going through. So most of the refugees are coming from Syria, and that's because of their long history. So basically, back in 1963, the Ba Party staged a military coup and completely took over the government. And ever since then, other countries deemed Syria to be reigned in a state of emergency because of how absolutely terrible the government style was. And then in the year 2000, a freedom movement broke out, and there was some opponent action and some uprisings speaking out against the government. And in response to that, the Assad regime that was currently in power slaughtered 300,000 Syrians and didn't stand for the freedom movement. And then in 2011, as is very obvious, there was an Arab Spring all throughout the Middle East. And it's interesting because the Arab Spring hit Syria last. It was one of the last countries to be affected by an Arab Spring. But a lot of people nowadays feel that the Arab Spring hit Syria the hardest. And due to that situation, an all-out civil war broke out. And there has been it's been a humanitarian catastrophe. A lot of humanitarian rights have been violated, and due to that, a lot of Syrians are fleeing. And if you look on the map, you can see Syria is surrounded by Iraq and Lebanon, but most importantly, to the north is Turkey, and that's an important country in this situation. Turkey has always been a critic of the Syrian government that's currently in power. They have donated a lot of weapons, money, and also people to fight the crisis because they have always been in favor of the Syrian opposition. So they want to get rid of the government style, the Assad regime that's in there right now. They would like to get rid of it. So they're donating all of these items to help aid the situation, which is really interesting because a lot of other countries are not doing that, but Turkey is in a prime position to be helping. And on top of that, on top of donating money and weapons and people, Turkey is also hosting over 2 million refugees. The Turkish government has granted the Syrians that have fled the country temporary protection status, and the government has also spent over 5 billion euros to establish camps and tent cities all throughout the country, but also on the border between Syria and Turkey. And a lot of humanitarian groups and organizations and governmental organizations have come into the camps to try and help the refugees because a lot of them don't have proper clothes, they haven't been fed in a while, they have healthcare needs that need to be attended to, and so the government has spent over 5 billion euros already to try and help the refugees. And although Turkey, like I said, has donated so much money and has spent so much money on the refugees, there's just not enough opportunities in Turkey for all 2 million of them. And the Turkish economy isn't strong enough to sustain, everything that they have already. And then on top of that, adding on 2 million more people. Some refugees have definitely made lives for themselves. They're establishing businesses in Turkey, but a good majority of them can't find anything. So they are leaving Turkey and they are trying to enter the European Union. They are crossing the Aegean Sea, and you can see in the map, the little diagram down on the right, they are crossing the Aegean Sea over into Greece, going through Macedonia, and then heading north to Hungary, Austria, Germany, and then spreading out from there. Because the rest of the European Union is basically a symbol of better job opportunities and having more money and being more economically prosperous. So a lot of the refugees want to go there. But unfortunately, a lot of the other countries, such as Hungary and Austria, and Greece, they're not accepting the refugees whatsoever. Besides the cultural differences, their government, their economies are not stable enough to support the inflow of people. So they're beginning to turn people away. In Hungary, for example, they closed down the major train station in Budapest to prevent people from furthering in through the country into other countries. Also in Austria and Vienna, the government is sending the refugees back to Hungary because that's the only way they're accessing is through Hungary. So they are sending them back there. And unfortunately, if they're not sending them back, the European Union is beginning to suffer from having to support all of this inflow of people. So the European Union's response to this was mentioned in class today, but by another student. But on March 20th, 2016, so just over a month and a half ago, the European Union agreed to give Turkey 6 billion euros over 3 years. So the money will be spread out, but it's going to go directly to Turkey to help the needs of the refugees and hopefully prevent them from crossing the Aegean Sea and going into Greece. They feel that if they give the money to Turkey to spend on the refugees, the refugees aren't going to have a desire to leave because there's going to be all this extra resources and everything right there for them that they don't need to leave. And finally, the immigration policy. Currently, there is no universal immigration policy held by the European Union. So when Germany decided they're going to accept refugees, that was perfectly fine. And then when Denmark said we're not going to accept any, that was also perfectly fine. The European Union at the moment doesn't have anything legally forcing the countries to take on any number of immigrants. They can persuade them to, but they don't have anything to legally force them to do it. But in 2015, there was a migration policy agenda created, and that had 4 strong goals for them that they've been working towards. It was towards the end of 2015, so we haven't quite seen the effects out of this yet. But the first goal was to reduce the incentives for irregular migration. So people that don't necessarily need to leave, as in those who aren't fleeing some type of crisis or from a war-torn country, they don't have to leave, so they shouldn't have to come. So if they reduce those incentives, the less people for the wrong reason will be in the country, and they'll be able to help more of those people that are there because they're seeking help and they're fleeing their country. And then also, they want to focus on saving lives and securing external borders. So a lot of refugees are dying on the journey from one country to another. It costs a lot of money to leave Syria, and they're just not, a lot of them are not making it. They're dying in the process. So the European Union wants to focus on saving those lives and also securing external borders. They want to keep the border of the entire European Union tight so that people aren't leaking through and coming in and out whenever they want to. They want to keep their border strong but allow for internal movement to continue. So once you get into the European Union, you can still freely move around, but they want to have a strong policy on their border. And then also, they want to create a strong common asylum policy. So once you have been admitted into the European Union, and you're seeking asylum, you seek asylum in one country, and they're trying to create a policy that incorporates all of the countries in the European Union, because right now the countries have individual policies. And then also, they would like to come up with a new policy on legal migration to find something that all 28 European Union countries can agree on to hopefully have their policies be in sync. But they also, at the same time, want to keep Europe as an attractive destination for migrants and for asylum seekers and for refugees. They don't want people to be afraid to come to Europe, but they still need to protect themselves and protect their economies and all of that. And that's my presentation.